It was a cold November morning in Detroit when recruit Maya Torres first entered the 6th Precinct police station. The red brick building seemed to carry decades of history within its walls, stained by the industrial soot that marked that part of the city. Maya clutched her bag tightly as she walked down the hallway, which smelled of stale coffee and accumulated paperwork. Her brown eyes took in every detail of the place that would be her new professional home for the next few months. She had dreamed of this moment since childhood, watching her grandfather put on his blue uniform before heading out for his nightly patrols through the streets of his old neighborhood. Sergeant Derek Callahan was leaning against the reception desk when she arrived. He was a burly man of 48, with gray hair cut close to his skull and a scar running across his left eyebrow. His icy blue eyes scanned Maya from head to toe with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, but which certainly didn't offer a welcoming look. Callahan had 26 years of service and a reputation that preceded his arrival. Some called him a legend. Others, in quiet whispers in the locker rooms, called him a tyrant. Maya introduced herself with the steady voice she had practiced in the mirror the night before. Callahan nodded briefly and gestured toward the women's locker room without saying a word. During the first few weeks, she had noticed him constantly watching her. It wasn't the normal supervision of a superior evaluating a rookie. It was something different, a surveillance that seemed to be searching for something specific. Maya felt the weight of that gaze whenever she entered the briefing room, or when she filled out her reports at the small table assigned to her in the corner of the investigations room. The 6th Precinct had its own unwritten codes. Maya soon learned that there was an invisible hierarchy that went far beyond shoulder patches and uniform insignia. Callahan controlled this hierarchy with an iron fist. He decided who got the best patrol routes, who was stuck with administrative paperwork, and who had access to the most interesting investigations. His favorites were obvious: officers who never questioned his orders, who laughed at his inappropriate jokes, and who turned a blind eye to certain inconsistencies in procedures. Maya didn't fit that mold. She had graduated from the academy with honors, specializing in forensic evidence procedures and possessing an impeccable track record in field simulations. More importantly, she genuinely believed in the principles she had been taught during her training. For her, law enforcement wasn't just a job. It was a calling that demanded absolute integrity. This perspective quickly put her on a collision course with how Callahan ran his territory. Everything began to change on a rainy Tuesday in March. Maya was making her usual rounds through the industrial area when she received a call about a fight at a bar on Jefferson Avenue. When she arrived at the scene, she found 2 men being restrained by security guards while a crowd gathered on the wet sidewalk. One of those involved was Marcus Chen, a known informant who had collaborated with the police on several drug trafficking cases in the area. The other was a man Maya didn't recognize, but who she later discovered was the nephew of a prominent local businessman with political connections. Maya followed protocol to the letter. She separated those involved, collected witness statements, documented visible injuries, and filled out her report with meticulous precision. Marcus Chen had a deep cut above his eye and claimed to have been attacked without provocation. The businessman's nephew, on the other hand, insisted it was merely self-defense. The witnesses presented conflicting versions, as was usually the case in these situations. Maya objectively recorded everything and forwarded the case for further investigation. The next day, Callahan summoned her to his office. The small room reeked of cigarettes, despite the no-smoking signs plastered throughout the building. He sat behind his desk, cluttered with disorganized folders and stacked coffee cups. Without lifting his eyes from the papers in front of him, he told Maya that he had reviewed her report on the bar incident. His voice was too casual, almost rehearsed. He pointed out several supposed inconsistencies in her account and suggested that perhaps she had misinterpreted the situation. It would be better, he insinuated, if the case were dismissed as a mutual altercation without further consequences. Maya felt something clench in her stomach. She knew her report by heart, and there were no inconsistencies. Every detail was correct and verifiable. She tried to explain this to Callahan, but he interrupted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He spoke about the importance of understanding the nuances of real police work, about how not everything was black and white as they taught at the academy. There were contexts, he said, that recruits simply couldn't yet comprehend. Maya left that office certain that something was profoundly wrong. In the following weeks, she began to notice patterns. Certain cases disappeared from official records. Reports were altered without the authorization of the officers who had written them. Evidence vanished from the holding cell without proper explanation, and whenever Maya tried to follow the correct procedures, she encountered inexplicable resistance. Callahan was always present, always observing, always ready to question her decisions or reinterpret her actions. The tension in the precinct was palpable. Other officers sensed what was happening, but no one spoke openly about it. Maya tried talking to some more experienced colleagues, seeking guidance or at least confirmation that her suspicions weren't paranoia. The answers were always evasive. Some quickly changed the subject. Others offered vague advice about not making waves or choosing her battles wisely. A veteran officer named Sandra Reeves approached her in the parking lot one night and whispered that Maya would be better off learning to work within the system instead of against it. Sandra's gaze conveyed something between warning and pity. Maya couldn't simply accept it. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her grandfather's face, remembering the stories he told about honoring the badge and protecting the defenseless. She hadn't gone. Through months of intensive training, and sacrificed so much just to become another cog in a corrupt system. But she wasn't naive either. She knew she needed concrete proof before making any accusations. Accusing a sergeant with 26 years of service without evidence would be professional suicide. That's when Maya began discreetly documenting everything. She made copies of reports before they could be altered. She noted inconsistencies in a notebook she kept locked in her personal locker. She recorded conversations when legally permitted. She was building a case, but she knew she needed something more definitive, something indisputable. The opportunity arrived in a way she could never have predicted. In May, the city implemented a pilot program for police transparency in the 6th Precinct. As part of the initiative, security cameras were installed in common areas of the precinct, including the evidence room, main hallways, and interrogation rooms. The measure was presented as a way to protect both citizens and police officers themselves, creating an objective record of interactions and procedures. Many officers complained about the perceived invasion of privacy, but the administration was adamant. The cameras were installed over a weekend and activated the following Monday. Callahan seemed particularly irritated by the new development. Maya overheard him complaining to other sergeants about political interference and how it undermined the trust necessary for effective police work. But the cameras remained, small dark spheres in the corners of the ceilings, silently recording everything that happened within their reach. Maya realized that this might be exactly what she needed. If Callahan was involved in corrupt activities, he would eventually slip up in front of those impartial lenses. She didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks after the cameras were installed, Maya was assigned to process evidence from a drug bust that had occurred the previous night. It was a relatively routine case. Cocaine found during a raid on an abandoned house on Woodward Avenue. The quantity wasn't huge, but it was enough to constitute trafficking. Maya followed all protocols, weighing, photographing, and labeling the packages before sealing everything in the evidence room. She filled out the necessary forms and filed her report before the end of her shift. The next day, when Maya checked the case to continue the procedures, she discovered something was wrong. The amount of drugs recorded in the system had changed. The weight she had meticulously documented now showed a significantly lower number. Furthermore, her report had been altered to include observations she had never made, suggesting that some of the substance might have been lost during transport due to improper handling on her part. Maya felt her blood run cold. Someone was actively trying to frame her. She immediately sought out Callahan to report the discrepancy. The sergeant greeted her with that neutral expression she had learned to distrust. He listened to her explanation in silence, flipping through the papers on his desk without really looking at them. When Maya finished speaking, Callahan leaned back in his chair and sighed heavily. He said he was disappointed. He expected more from her. Mistakes happened, he continued, especially with inexperienced recruits, but trying to deny responsibility and fabricate conspiracies was unacceptable. Maya tried to protest, but he raised his hand in a gesture of silence. There would be an internal investigation, he informed her. Until then, she was suspended from her field duties and would be reassigned to administrative work. Maya left that office trembling with anger and frustration. She knew exactly what was happening. Callahan was orchestrating a situation to destroy her credibility and possibly her career. If the internal investigation followed the course he had clearly planned, Maya would be held responsible for the disappearance of the drugs. At best, she would be fired for incompetence. At worst, she could face criminal charges for misappropriation of evidence. It was a perfect trap, and she had fallen right into it. But Callahan had made a crucial mistake. He had forgotten about the cameras, or perhaps he simply didn't believe anyone would review the recordings to defend a problematic recruit. Maya, however, hadn't forgotten. She knew her every move in the evidence room had been recorded. The cameras would have captured her weighing and sealing the packages correctly. More importantly, the cameras would also record anyone who entered that room afterward. If someone had altered the evidence, there would be a visual record of that action. The problem was how to access these recordings. Maya wasn't authorized to review the surveillance system on her own. She would need support, someone within the department willing to risk their own position to help her. Maya thought carefully about who she could trust. Most officers clearly wouldn't get involved. But there was one person who might be able to help. Detective Linda Wu, an internal affairs investigator who had visited the precinct a few times during the camera implementation process. Maya managed to contact Wu through official channels and requested a private meeting. They met at a coffee shop on the other side of town, away from the prying eyes of the 6th precinct. Maya laid everything out on the table. She talked about her suspicions. Regarding Callahan, about the disappearing cases, about the altered reports, and then she explained what had happened to the evidence and how she believed the security cameras would prove her innocence. Wu listened without interrupting, making occasional notes in a small notebook. When Maya finished, the detective remained silent for a long moment, studying the recruit's face intently. Finally, Wu spoke. She said there had been rumors about Callahan for years, but never enough evidence to warrant a formal investigation. He was cautious and had powerful connections within the department. Messing with him without solid proof would be dangerous. But if Maya was right about the cameras, it could change everything. Wu promised she would personally review the evidence room recordings from the relevant days. She warned Maya not to do anything that might alert Callahan to her suspicions. If he realized they were investigating, he might destroy evidence or fabricate more incriminating material. Maya agreed, and went home that night with a mixture of hope and anxiety. The next few days were torturous. Maya was relegated to working in the archives, organizing old paperwork while trying to appear defeated and resigned. Callahan would occasionally pass by her desk, always with that satisfied smile that made her stomach churn. Other officers avoided her, as if she carried some contagious disease. Maya understood the dynamic. No one wanted to be seen associating with someone under investigation, especially when that investigation had been initiated by Callahan himself. She was isolated, exactly as he had planned. But while Maya feigned compliance, Wu was at work. The detective reviewed hours of recordings, meticulously following every entry and exit from the evidence room. What she found was even more incriminating than Maya had imagined. The cameras clearly showed Maya processing the drugs correctly, following each step of the established protocol. The recordings confirmed the exact weight she had documented in her original report. But then, approximately 6 hours after Maya had left the precinct, the cameras captured another figure entering the evidence room. It was Sergeant Derek Callahan. Wu watched as Callahan, scanning the corridors to ensure he was alone, opened the evidence cabinet with his master key. He located the package Maya had processed and, with the efficient movements of someone who had done this many times before, removed a significant portion of the substance. He transferred the material to a plastic bag he had brought with him and replaced the original package in the cabinet. Then, calmly, he went to the room's computer and accessed the evidence registration system. The cameras captured him, altering the numbers in the digital file and modifying Maya's report to include observations about alleged improper handling. Everything was recorded in high definition, with precise timestamps and angles that left no doubt about the perpetrator's identity. Wu didn't just review that incident. She expanded her investigation, scouring previous recordings. What she discovered was a systematic pattern of corruption. During the month since the cameras were installed, Callahan had entered the evidence room at least a dozen times outside of his regular hours, and without official justification. On each visit, he removed portions of seized drugs. Wu also discovered recordings of him meeting with unidentified individuals in parking lots near the precinct, discreet exchanges that clearly involved the materials he had stolen. Callahan wasn't just planting evidence against Maya. He was operating a drug diversion scheme that likely spanned years, long before the security cameras were installed. Detective Wu took her findings directly to Captain James Morrison, the division commander. Morrison was a 55-year-old man known for his strictness regarding departmental integrity issues. As he watched the recordings Wu had compiled, his face grew increasingly grim. The situation was worse than he could have imagined. A veteran sergeant was not only corrupt, but actively trying to destroy the career of an upright recruit to cover up his own crimes. Morrison didn't hesitate. He ordered Callahan's immediate arrest and a full investigation into all the cases the sergeant had overseen in the last 5 years. Callahan was arrested one Friday morning in front of the entire precinct. Maya was present, still working in the files. When she saw the internal affairs investigators enter through the main door, she watched through the window as they made their way to Callahan's office. Minutes later, the sergeant was led in handcuffs down the same corridor he had dominated for so many years. His face was red with anger and disbelief. He looked around for allies, but all the officers averted their eyes. No one wanted to be associated with him now. As he passed Maya, their eyes met for a brief moment. She said nothing, only maintained her neutral expression. There was no triumph in her gaze, only a silent satisfaction that justice was finally being served. The subsequent investigation revealed the full extent of Callahan's corruption. For nearly 8 years, he had systematically diverted seized drugs and resold them through intermediaries on the streets of Detroit. The money, estimated at hundreds of thousands of dollars, had been used to finance a lifestyle far beyond what his sergeant's salary could afford. He owned properties in other states, luxury cars registered in false names, and offshore bank accounts. But even more disturbing was the discovery that he had ruined the careers of at least 3 other officers over the years, all of whom had threatened to expose his activities, or simply stood in the way of his schemes. Maya had not been his first victim, only the last. The difference was that this time, the cameras were rolling. The case generated nationwide repercussions. It wasn't just about a corrupt police officer. It was about how surveillance technology, implemented to protect citizens, had also ended up protecting an honest officer from a system that had tried to destroy her. Recordings of Callahan altering evidence and planting false documents were shown on national news programs. Maya unwittingly became the face of a larger discussion about police accountability and the importance of oversight mechanisms. For Maya, however, all of that was secondary. She didn't want to be a celebrity or a symbol. She just wanted to do the job she had been trained for. Captain Morrison personally apologized to her for what she had suffered and offered her a transfer to any precinct she chose. Maya thanked him, but decided to stay in the 6th precinct. That place had tried to break her, and she wouldn't give it the satisfaction of seeing her leave defeated. Besides, the precinct needed rebuilding, and she wanted to be part of that process. In the following months, significant changes were implemented. New supervisors were brought in from outside to restore a culture of integrity. Ethics training was made mandatory. The security cameras, which some wanted removed after the scandal, were kept and expanded. The evidence room received additional tracking systems that recorded every access in multiple independent databases. Management was determined to ensure that something like the Callahan regime could never happen again. Maya was promoted to full officer 6 months, earlier than normal, and received a commendation for her courage and integrity. During the ceremony, she thought of her grandfather, who had passed away 2 years earlier. He would have been proud. She had faced a situation that would have destroyed many others, and emerged not only unscathed, but strengthened. The experience had taught Maya that doing the right thing often meant being alone, meant risking everything with no guarantee of victory, but it had also confirmed her fundamental belief that truth eventually prevails, especially when there is someone brave enough to defend it. Derek Callahan was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for corruption, drug trafficking, obstruction of justice, and attempting to falsely incriminate an official. He lost his pension, his assets were confiscated, and his reputation was permanently destroyed. During the trial, he tried to claim he had been framed and that the recordings had been manipulated, but the evidence was irrefutable. Dozens of witnesses, including some of his former allies, testified against him. In the end, the jury took less than 3 hours to find him guilty on all charges. While the prison van took Callahan away to serve his sentence, Maya was beginning another patrol through the streets of Detroit. The radio on her belt crackled with routine calls. The city continued with its daily problems, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding in its police precincts. Maya adjusted her utility belt and checked her equipment. There was work to be done, people to protect, laws to enforce, and now she could do it all knowing that the system, however imperfect, still had mechanisms to self-correct when sufficiently determined people refused to accept corruption as inevitable. The hidden camera that had recorded everything wasn't really secret. It had been there all along, right there, in full view of everyone, silently waiting for the truth to be revealed.